From the very start, the relationship between Rasheeda and Kirk Frost was packaged like a perfect union, the kind of story people wanted to believe in, the kind of love tale people whispered about when they needed proof that loyalty and ambition could coexist. Long before reality television set up its lights inside their living room, their names already carried a certain weight in Atlanta. She was a young woman determined to carve out a place in an industry that barely made room for her. Every mixtape she dropped was a declaration, every performance was a fight, every lyric she spat carried the hunger of someone who had been counted out too many times. He was positioned beside her, not just as a man but as a manager, a strategist, a protector of sorts who claimed he was the one keeping the paperwork neat, the booking steady, and the lights fixed on her grind. Together they looked like something people wanted to root for, two dreamers building something in a city that thrived on rejection, hustling together as if the whole world had underestimated them. To those on the outside, it was a blueprint. To Atlanta, it was a love and business empire in the making. But beneath all that shine, cracks were always hiding, waiting for the first big spotlight to expose them. That spotlight arrived when VH1 knocked on their door. Once the cameras started rolling for Love and Hip Hop, Atlanta, admiration turned into scrutiny overnight. No longer were people focused only on Rasheeda's music videos, boutique launches, or flawless red carpet looks. Now, they saw the other side, the raised voices, the clipped tones, the tears sliding down her face in moments that could never again be erased. Suddenly, arguments that once lived in the privacy of their home became entertainment for millions. Fans who once celebrated their hustle now dissected their pain, tweeting their opinions as if they lived inside the Frost household. Kirk's way of talking down to Rasheeda wasn't just felt by her anymore, it was broadcast, replayed, gifted, and turned into soundbites for messy podcasts. Each disrespectful tone, each dismissive smirk, each moment she shrank back was cemented into reality TV history. Their marriage wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to the audience, and that audience consumed their pain like it was prime time. Fuel, the betrayal that would define them came swiftly and brutally. Kirk Frost's infidelity wasn't whispered about in back alleys or hinted at through shady blog posts. It played out in real time with cameras documenting every jagged edge. The revelation that he had fathered a child outside of his marriage with Rasheeda wasn't just a wound, it was a public crucifixion. What should have been a private hell turned into a storyline replayed across living rooms and phones. Every facial expression Rasheeda wore, every crack in her voice, every tear rolling down her cheeks was cut into memes, looped on Twitter threads, or thrown into YouTube comment sections as strangers debated her strength. Some called her foolish, others called her loyal, but all of them watched, eyes glued, as if her pain was a sport. Talk shows and bloggers alike turned her marriage into a debate topic. Was she staying for love, or was she staying because the empire was too intertwined to unravel? Nobody cared that the reality was more complicated than a yes or no. What mattered to the world was that they had front row seats to a woman's humiliation, and they wouldn't let her forget it. And yet, what hurt more than the betrayal itself was the way it became a pattern. Kirk didn't stumble just once, he created a cycle. A rumor here, another scandal there, whispers too loud to ignore, decisions too reckless to excuse. Every time, Rasheeda was forced into the spotlight, standing at the crossroads between leaving or staying. Tears fell, promises followed, apologies spilled across confessionals, and reconciliations unfolded in front of cameras that never missed a beat. The fans grew restless, even angry. They screamed at their screens, "Leave him, Rasheeda," as if they could grab her hand through Instagram and drag her away themselves. They called her blind, weak, trapped. But what they didn't understand is that walking away wasn't as simple as packing a bag. Walking away meant tearing apart not just a marriage but an empire. Leaving Kirk meant unraveling businesses, splitting assets, fighting over the very foundation they had built together brick by brick. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was survival. The Frost Empire wasn't some shallow brand. It was real money, real contracts, real investments tied so tightly together that pulling one string could collapse the entire thing. Their businesses became both their pride and their prison. Pressed, the boutique that Rasheeda turned into a cornerstone of Atlanta fashion, wasn't just a store, it was a symbol of resilience. Frost Bistro, the restaurant branded as their joint dream, was more than a place to eat, it was a monument to their image as a couple who could survive anything. Their ventures in music publishing, endorsements, and television contracts all bore both of their fingerprints. To split would mean more than divorce, it would mean demolition. And for Rasheeda, who had carefully transitioned from rapper to entrepreneur, who had clawed her way into credibility and independence, the risk of watching everything she had built crumble because of one man's mistakes must have felt unbearable. Staying wasn't just about love, it was about holding the empire together long enough to figure out how to walk away without losing it all. But by 2025, something shifted. The whispers weren't the usual ones about Kirk chasing temptation or Rasheeda breaking down on screen. This time, it was about silence. Fans noticed that Rasheeda started showing up to events alone. The once unified front now looked fractured, the empty space beside her husband impossible to ignore. Her Instagram posts no longer dropped coded hints about their bond. Instead, they highlighted her own hustle, her beauty, her grind, her individuality. Interviews that once leaned heavily on "we" shifted decisively into "I." Red carpet photos captured her standing solo in gowns that radiated independence. TikTok detectives pieced together every detail, her captions, her wardrobe, her sudden glow of detachment, as coded signals that separation wasn't just gossip anymore, it was reality. And the silence from Kirk? It was louder than any words he could have spoken. The man who once sprinted to deny, deflect, and spin every rumor now said nothing. No interviews, no Instagram videos, no defensive statements. Just a void where his voice used to be. And in today's world, silence is often taken as confession. What made this silence even more powerful was the way the public responded. For years, fans had begged Rasheeda to leave, almost pleading in her comments, chanting through hashtags, demanding she reclaim her dignity. But in 2025, something changed. They weren't begging anymore, they were celebrating. They weren't criticizing, they were applauding. Entire Twitter threads erupted in praise, with fans imagining Rasheeda thriving as an independent mogul, free from the constant weight of Kirk's betrayal. Blogs reframed the narrative, no longer treating divorce as a downfall but as a rebirth. They painted a picture of Rasheeda not as a victim but as a phoenix, finally rising out of the ashes of humiliation. The very same woman who was mocked for staying too long was now being set up to be celebrated for finally choosing herself. That shift in tone was massive. It revealed a cultural change. People no longer wanted to see her endure, they wanted to see her break free. Yet behind the cheers and the gossip threads, the quiet truth remained: divorce for Rasheeda would never be simple. Beyond boutiques, bistros, and brand endorsements, there were children. Children who had been forced to grow up under the camera's gaze, who never had the option of privacy. A divorce wouldn't just be splitting property, it would be splitting a family under the cruelest lights of fame. For Rasheeda, whose protective instincts as a mother often clashed with the demands of reality TV, that decision must have weighed heavier than any headline could capture. And that's what made the silence so haunting. It wasn't the silence of someone careless, it was the silence of someone calculating, protecting, weighing, and preparing for a move that would affect more than just herself. But then came the doubt. Was even this silence real, or was it just another performance? The Frosts had built a career off spinning chaos into content, transforming betrayal into ratings, humiliation into headlines, and reconciliation into primetime finales. Could this be just another setup? Another storyline for the next season, carefully orchestrated so the cycle could continue? Some fans believed wholeheartedly that they would never part, not because of love, but because the empire was simply too valuable to dismantle. And in truth, both realities seemed believable. On one hand, there was a woman finally stepping into independence, cheered on by fans who had grown tired of seeing her cry. On the other, there was a brand so deeply entangled that breaking it apart felt almost impossible. And that's what made this chapter so gripping: the blurred line between truth and performance, the uncertainty about whether fans were witnessing liberation or just another plot twist in a saga that had already defied predictions for more than a decade. The silence became the loudest chapter of their story yet. Blogs speculated daily, podcasts debated endlessly, fans scrolled through timelines hungry for confirmation. If Rasheeda filed, it would be remembered as one of the defining moments of reality television, a woman finally walking away after years of public betrayal. If she didn't, it would mark another dramatic twist in a saga that had already proven it could bend and twist in ways no one expected. Either way, the Frost Empire trembled under the weight of what came next, and the world was watching like never before. The deeper anyone looked into the marriage of Rasheeda and Kirk Frost, the harder it became to separate business from love, loyalty from survival. For years, endurance was mistaken for strength, as if her ability to forgive meant the relationship was unbreakable. But by 2025, that rhythm of scandal followed by apology had lost its beat. The cycle of betrayal, heartbreak, reconciliation, and television ratings began to slow, almost like a machine running out of fuel. And for the first time, silence spoke louder than another staged reunion. The quiet between them became heavier than any shouting match ever broadcast, because silence is harder to script. It lingers. It hints at permanence. Viewers who once assumed there would always be another reconciliation began to wonder if they were witnessing the quiet dismantling of one of Atlanta's most infamous unions. The confusion came from how betrayal had been normalized in their story. When Kirk fathered a child outside his marriage, the world assumed that would be the breaking point. Few relationships could withstand such a wound, let alone one filmed for millions to pick apart. And yet, Rasheeda stayed. She stayed even as her humiliation was clipped into memes, even as strangers labeled her weak, even as gossip sites dissected her every tear. To the outside world, her choice looked like surrender. But to those who understood the mechanics of business, it was strategy. Walking away would not have just meant divorcing a man, it would have meant untangling years of contracts, rebranding businesses, and potentially losing everything she had fought to create. Love and loyalty may have played a part, but survival was the greater weight on her shoulders. She was not just protecting her heart, she was protecting an empire, but every time she stayed, Kirk's public image corroded further. Fans stopped granting him any benefit of the doubt. Every rumor was treated as truth, every questionable move painted as proof, every headline assumed to be another betrayal. Over time, Kirk transformed in the eyes of the public from a flawed husband into a caricature of disloyalty. His presence became a stain, dragging down the woman he was supposed to uplift. For Rasheeda, that meant her smiles were no longer seen as joy but as masks. Her appearances weren't celebrated but scrutinized. Every time she held his hand, fans searched her eyes for signs of hidden pain. To live under that constant suspicion, to carry that much projection from strangers, would have broken most people. But she endured it with the kind of poise that made her an inspiration to some and a target of pity to others. By the time separation rumors caught fire in 2025, nobody was shocked anymore. Social media didn't ask if she would leave, they asked when. Entire threads bloomed with fans imagining her next chapter, Pressed expanding under her name alone, Rasheeda attending red carpets as her own brand, her fashion lines thriving without the shadow of scandal looming behind them. To these supporters, divorce wasn't a tragedy, it was a transformation. They no longer rooted for the Frost marriage to survive. They rooted for Rasheeda to reclaim herself. And that shift said everything. The cultural investment had changed. The love story was dead. What mattered now was her rebirth. Meanwhile, Kirk's silence only amplified the noise. This was a man who had always had something to say, denials, explanations, spins designed to twist the narrative back into his control. Now there was nothing. No statement, no social media videos, no public appearances. Just absence. And in a world addicted to receipts, absence became its own confirmation. Fans filled in the blanks with their own stories, guilt, shame, resignation, maybe all three. Whatever the truth, the lack of defense felt like an admission. For the first time, the story was not his to spin. The silence shifted the power back into Rasheeda's hands, whether she spoke or not, but gossip rarely captures the weight of real decisions. Divorce for Rasheeda and Kirk isn't just about emotions. It's structural. Pressed is not just her store, it's their family brand. Frost Bistro wasn't just a restaurant, it was a couple's dream project. Their ventures, endorsements, and image as a resilient couple have been monetized for years. Splitting that apart means more than dividing property. It means lawsuits, rebranding, renegotiating contracts, and rewriting the narrative of businesses that had been sold to the public as proof of endurance. Fans may cheer her on, but the cost of freedom isn't as easy as clicking unfollow. It's a legal war, a financial reshaping, and possibly years of rebuilding. That complexity is why the silence feels deliberate, because behind the curtain, the paperwork, the negotiations, and the hard decisions might already be underway, and then, there is the family at the center. The Frost children never chose to live under the glare of cameras, but they had no choice. Their childhoods were broadcast, their parents' tears and reconciliations turned into storylines, their very existence woven into the brand. A divorce would not just reshape the household. It would reshape their lives under a spotlight that never dims. For Rasheeda, that reality complicates every move. She is not just weighing her freedom, she is protecting her children while the world watches like it has a right to judge. That double burden explains the caution, the silence, and the patience. Every step she takes is heavier because it is not just hers, yet speculation grows louder every day. Blogs claim insiders have seen court filings. Gossip pages insist the paperwork is already in motion. TikTok detectives analyze her voice, her captions, her jewelry, claiming it all signals independence. None of it is confirmed. But in this era, confirmation barely matters. Perception becomes reality, and the perception now is that the Frost marriage is already over. Fans congratulate her as if the papers are signed. Others brace themselves for disappointment, convinced it is all just another scripted arc designed to pull ratings. That tension, between those who believe this is freedom and those who suspect its performance, is what keeps the world hooked. The Frosts are no longer just people, they are a cultural study in how blurred the line between love, business, and entertainment can become, and history backs the skepticism. Over and over, the Frosts have proven their ability to turn chaos into cash. Scandal became storylines. Betrayal became episodes. Tears became trailers. Every time the audience thought it was over, the Frosts staged a comeback, walking onto reunion stages hand in hand, selling the story of survival as if pain was a commodity they could endlessly resell. That history makes the current silence so haunting. If this were another storyline, wouldn't they be speaking by now? Wouldn't they be dropping teasers? The lack of noise makes it feel different, more final, like the performance has ended and only reality remains. But still, a sliver of doubt remains because with the Frosts, survival has always been the brand. What sets this moment apart, though, is how the energy has shifted around Rasheeda herself. For the first time, the narrative isn't about her endurance. It's about her independence. She is no longer just the wife who stayed. She is seen as the woman who might finally choose herself. That transformation is already happening in the minds of her supporters. They are not waiting for court papers. They are not waiting for statements. To them, the rebirth is already here. And in reality television, perception is power. The more fans believe in her independence, the more it becomes true, whether or not she has filed anything at all. By mid-2025, whispers turned into full-fledged conversations. The Frost marriage was no longer just gossip fodder, it was a cultural talking point. Analysts on podcasts, writers on blogs, and fans across Twitter Spaces treated it like a case study. How reality television can turn wounds into profit. How betrayal can be packaged into ratings. How love can blur so deeply with business that the two cannot be separated. The silence defied their history. For more than a decade, chaos was always followed by statements, by staged reconciliations, by curated explanations. Now, nothing. And nothing felt heavier than anything else they had ever delivered. To many, the silence itself was the finale, the confirmation, the end of a saga that had defined love and hip-hop. Atlanta for more than 10 years. For years, Rasheeda was praised for her resilience. She endured storms that most people would never survive. She turned humiliation into branding, betrayal into opportunity. But endurance does not equal happiness, and resilience does not equal peace. The invisible weight of carrying betrayal eventually crushes anyone who tries to hold it for too long. By 2025, it was clear that the weight had reached its limit. Her solo appearances, her sharper focus on business, her glow of independence were not just branding, they were survival tactics. They were the choices of a woman who had realized that strength without freedom is still captivity. And no empire, no contract, no restaurant, no boutique, is worth sacrificing her peace. On the other side, Kirk Frost remained frozen in the shadow of his own history. No matter how many businesses he ran, no matter how many investments succeeded, his name remained stained. In the eyes of the public, he was no longer a businessman. Or even a flawed husband. He was the villain of a long-running saga, the man whose role was to keep the drama alive at the expense of the woman beside him. His silence in 2025 felt less like strategy and more like surrender. It was as if he finally knew the narrative had slipped beyond his control. For years, he could talk his way through chaos. Now the world no longer cared to listen. Sympathy had dried up. Excuses no longer landed. His silence left him standing in the ruins of his own reputation, while Rasheeda stood on the edge of a rebirth that was no longer just hers. It was cultural. The empire they built together still stands. But the foundation beneath it trembles. Crest remains a symbol of Rasheeda's grind, Frost Bistro still carries their names, and every contract they signed together still ties them in ways that cannot be undone overnight. But the irony is clear, the same businesses that once kept them locked together may now thrive more under Rasheeda alone than they ever did as a couple. Her independence has become a stronger brand than their unity. Fans are ready to support her, not them. The shift in loyalty has already happened, and Kirk's silence only sharpens the contrast. His absence feels like the closing chapter of a man who once had the power to spin every scandal but now stands powerless in the shadow of his own mistakes. The children, often overlooked in the storm of gossip, remain the most fragile part of this story. Their lives have always been documented without consent, their family moments turned into reality television plotlines. A divorce would reshape their world while millions watched, forming opinions and judgments that should never belong to strangers. And for Rasheeda, that weight is heavier than any gossip headline. She is not just a public figure, she is a mother, forced to balance freedom with protection, her silence reflecting caution rather than fear. Every move she makes is deliberate. Because the stakes are not just about business or marriage, they are about family. Speculation continues to spiral. Blogs claim filings exist, gossip pages push insider stories, TikTok detectives turn her every move into evidence. But confirmation is no longer necessary. Perception has already hardened into belief, the Frost marriage is over. For some, this feels like victory, the long-awaited liberation of a woman who endured too much. For others, it still feels like a storyline waiting for another twist. That tension is what makes the Frost saga unforgettable, the uncertainty between reality and performance, the possibility that even endings can be edited into new beginnings. If divorce is real, it will mark the end of an era, one of the most defining relationships in love and hip-hop history, finally collapsing under the weight of betrayal and survival. If it is not, then it will only prove what many skeptics have said all along, that the Frosts are less about love and more about legacy, less about marriage and more about the empire they refuse to let fall. Either way, the silence has become the most powerful statement of all. Silence that feels deliberate. Silence that feels final. Silence that hangs heavy, like both an ending and a beginning. And as the cameras wait, the blogs speculate, and the fans lean forward for confirmation, one truth is undeniable: the Frost Empire will never be the same, and whatever happens next will define them forever.